what's now called level 3 mindfulness, or seeing deeply. We used to call this insight. It sounds really exciting, a bit sexy, as if something very special is going to happen. But I think I want to point out at the beginning that just like mindfulness and compassion, this ability to see deeply or to have insight into our own mind is a natural capacity. Everybody has it. And the training is just developing ways to make that more likely to happen. So it's totally similar to our training in mindfulness and compassion, and it grows out of it. So if we think we're becoming advanced, I think we maybe need to go back and remind ourselves, why do we practice? And the real reason, I think it has to be, is that we don't want to suffer. And possibly we want to allow our natural capacity for happiness to flourish. So when we work with mindfulness and compassion, most of the time it's about stopping fighting with ourselves, stopping fighting with our experience, allowing the mind to rest. And just by not making things worse, they seem to get better, which is great. But when we start to become aware of our inner environment, I think what we learn, and we possibly, I don't think we learn it so much as a theory, we witness it for ourselves, that the mind has this natural tendency to disturb itself, to create problems for itself. And I think we then need to look at how these difficulties that we self-create come about. So the manifestations of these difficulties is that we like some things, we don't like other things, fine, but it gets a bit exaggerated and it becomes, I really want that and I really don't want that. Then it becomes at an interpersonal level, it turns into jealousy. We see somebody having something very easy that we've been trying so hard to get and it's not happening for us. So it's still based on the wanting, but it becomes jealousy. Or it could go well for us, and it could be that everything's going great for me and this is flowing and it's dead easy, and we notice somebody else struggling and we make this conclusion that I'm better than they are, and that's pride. And these restricting, limiting emotions, or whatever you want to call them, they're not great. Each in their own way they cause us pain and difficulty. Those are the manifestations. If there is a root to them, it's I have to call it ignorance. We are ignorant because we behave as if and run our lives as if there is an independent, solid self at the centre of the universe, me. When plainly, life is interdependent. We all depend on each other and we all need each other. And everyone has the same wishes, but this sense of me puts me first before everyone else. And it is so not a recipe for happiness. And then what happens is this solid sense of a separate me has desire, for example. And that desire strengthens a sense of self, and that sense of self strengthens the desire. And this interplay between this feeling of a sense of self that's separate at the centre of everything, and its interplay with the world, if we see this in action, we realise that it could actually go on forever. There's no reason that it would come to rest of its own accord. And it's for this that mindfulness and compassion are not enough. We can't attack ourselves directly and get rid of these limiting emotions. So this is where the path of seeing deeply, or having insight into the psychological processes that drive it, becomes relevant. So the approach that we take is that we learn to expose the process, which takes courage and it takes self-compassion, and it also takes some kind of clarity or stability that's been developed through our mindfulness practice to be able to look directly at what's going on. So not in a theoretical sense of how it should be, but we learn to work directly with ourselves as we are, as we find ourselves. And then there is something else we can do to help this, is that we can skillfully work with supportive conditions that show us that there may be more positive alternatives, and we can loosen the grip of the destructive emotions through that. But all of this is underpinned by our resting. This ability that the mind has, a deep wish that the mind has to rest, but this total addiction to being busy and to distressing itself. So what happens is that the resting actually supports our ability to work with the destructive emotions, and as we work with the destructive emotions, that supports our ability to rest. So those are the practices that we do. Now, some people want to teach mindfulness, and some people don't have an interest in teaching mindfulness, and they purely see themselves as practitioners. And I think this course is equally valid, in fact necessary, for both groups of people. If we want to teach others, I feel that the extent to which we're really comfortable and at ease with ourselves and with our own processes is the extent to which we're able to meet other people where they are, and that's when teaching happens. And if we just look at it from the point of view of our own practice, the extent to which we're able to face ourselves and our situation as it is, and to be with that, I think that's the extent to which we're able to rest. And, interestingly, I think this ability to rest is what makes our lives more and more effective. So I don't think that this level 3 seeing deeply or insight is an add-on extra. I think it's the culmination of the program and the training in mindfulness and compassion that brings everything together, and actually I think is necessary. Someone regards their mindfulness journey as something that they're undertaking for really their own happiness and well-being within their personal professional lives. They can complete the level 1 and complete level 2, but I really would encourage people to continue and complete this journey. Not that we ever complete the journey, but to carry on with this level 3 of seeing deeply into what's happening, because I think it makes sense of the other 2 modules, and then they really work together and support each other, and then people from that would be able to join the Mindfulness for Life program, and you really would then have the basis of a practice for life. But if people, as well as that, want to become engaged in teaching practice, then in any event, the mindfulness level 1 isn't enough, and you will need to engage in ongoing CPD in order to meet the UK guidelines. So this course has been designed so that it would be suitable as part of that ongoing CPD. It can take place either over 3 weekends, in which case in the first weekend we're looking primarily at the way that thought becomes thinking. And then in the second weekend we're primarily looking at these destructive or limiting emotions. And then in the third weekend we look at how all this has contributed to our ability to rest. And just as with the other levels of mindfulness training, there's group weekends and there's a suggested practice schedule between them. and that takes place over about 6 months. There's another possibility sometimes to be able to do this as one weekend training followed by a retreat. If it's more convenient for people, it would also that would meet the UK guidelines for CPD. If we do it that way, then the weekend that's done initially would be the looking at this, how thought becomes thinking, and introducing some of the practices ready for that. Then when we come to do the retreat, we would be doing both looking into the destructive or limiting emotions, and then moving on to the exploration of how this might help us to rest. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I think it's something that's evolved out of Rob's teaching and that we've developed as we've taught it. But I really think it makes a difference. And from the feedback that other people have given us, it does make sense of the other programs. For example, we talk a lot in the beginnings of mindfulness training about the importance of not suppressing and not fabricating, not suppressing unwanted experiences, fabricating a so-called preferred experience. And this makes sense of it because we learn to trust the mind to heal itself. We trust its own impetus towards wholeness, and that becomes apparent when we work with the insight practices. And in a way, just as with a mindfulness practice, the last thing you would do, if you have a painful, limiting, destructive emotion, of course the natural instinct is to get rid of it. What's the remedy? How do I make it go away? It hurts. But this is counterintuitive, but to learn to be with it and to let it tell us what it's got to tell us and let it pass through us seems to be the most effective way to work with it, actually. Because anything that we do to try to fix it actually holds it in place for even longer. And we are here talking about freedom, not necessarily freedom from ever having unwanted experiences, but we become less limited by them, so we become free of the power that they hold over us, so that they don't rule our lives anymore. And that's worth doing.